It's wonderful to see such a beautiful gathering of powerful souls who've come here tonight. So thank you all for being here. Some of you I've been meeting in Mount Abu, some of you in other places in the world, but it's lovely to have all of you gathered here today. Raj Yoga is actually another expression for inner leadership, because the word Raja, the sovereign, the king, the master, yoga, the connection of the self with the divine. These two words give us an indication that when there is connection of the self with the divine, that brings us such mastery, which is first and foremost mastery over the self. It's not power over anyone else, but it's mastery over the self. And when that happens, and when it actually is expressed in our life and in our activity, in our relationships, then everybody feels that, yes, this is something I would like to do in my life also. And so leader then happens in a very natural way. When our dadis, our senior teachers, began this work with the founder, Brahma Baba, and when Brahma Baba passed away and he handled the mantle of leadership. Can you hear? Can you hear at the back? Yes? Okay. Better? Yes? When we used to say that the dadis are our leaders, they'd say, no, I'm just one of you. They didn't like the word leader, because so often when there's a leader, there's many other connotations that come with it. But they actually fitted in a very beautiful way in another definition of leader. I remember being at the State of the World Forum in San Francisco at the turn of the century, and Peter Senge was the main speaker at that time. And he was asked to speak on the qualities of leadership needed for the 21st century. And I was very surprised. I didn't know him at the time on a personal level. After that, we worked for 25 years together as co-chairs for the Call of Time dialogue. Some of you have been involved in that. And he said at that time, the foremost quality of a leader for the 21st century is humility. I wasn't expecting to hear that from somebody of his caliber in an international forum, but it's a fact. When there is humility, there's an awareness that there's not just I on my own doing something, but there's the awareness of a team together, but also there's a recognition that whatever it is I can do on my own, there's another power up above that's guiding me. And if I can stay connected and in tune with that power, then yes, I can achieve something greater than what I alone could have managed. So our dadis, some of you know who they were. We had about 350 dadis, the founding members of the Brahma Kumaris. We had a few dadas, senior brothers. Dadi means elder sister. We had a few senior brothers also, and we still have some of them. But all the dadis except one have passed away. But the legacy that they've left behind is of a different type of leadership, one based on love, compassion, and truth. And so yes, when you bring in the word truth, then you can see it involves understanding certain disciplines, understanding certain principles, but essentially law that is based on love, rather than just the law by itself. And when there's the understanding of spiritual laws that guide us, then of course all of those are rooted deeply in love for the divine, love for the human family, but also even love for the self. And that's nothing to do with ego, but rather it's an understanding of how whatever is going on inside is what then gets expressed outside. Do you agree? if I'm not in a very good mood inside, how does that function? You can see it instantly in relationships. Whoever it is you're connected with, you're serving with, working with, or living with. And so this rule of inside out extends absolutely to the subject of leadership. If I can have mastery over my own thoughts and feelings, over my own personality traits, even over my responses and reactions, then yes, that is leadership. That is being the master of the self, Raj Yoga. There's a lovely word, Swaraj, self-sovereignty. And this applies to Raj Yoga, being the sovereign, the master of the self. And in a very natural way then, the leadership is such that others will want to follow the lead that you are taking. How does one arrive at that? By going inside and by exploring the depth of what is happening inside of me. Where are my thoughts coming from? If I'm going through certain feelings, where are they coming from? What is personality? How are my thoughts and feelings connected with personality? Where do I get my personality traits from? Am I born with them? Is it nurture? Or is it ancestry? Is it birth? What is it? And so looking at myself and going deep within myself means I'm able to explore this amazing field of the inner being. And through that understanding, learning to move myself in the direction of my choice. And if my choice today is to move to a state in which there's stability, peace, truth, harmony, love, then I need to have spiritual guidance. And that spiritual guidance from the divine is available to all of us. I'd like to share the example now not only of our beloved Dadis, but also of Brahma Baba himself. What was the world like in 1936? We weren't around, so we wouldn't have had that experience, but we know enough about it. Everything has been very clearly recorded. We started when Brahma Baba, this man, a jeweler, highly respected in his community, a very devout person who spent hours in prayer and meditation, but at the same time was a highly successful self-made man, a jeweler, a diamond merchant, whose eye, we didn't have the instruments at that time that we have today, but his eye for valuing gems was incredible, and his creativity was able to win the hearts of the Maharanis at the time, but also the Viceroy at that time in India. And so he worked on that level. And so it was enough to work for 4 hours. 4 hours was spent in prayer and meditation, and the rest of the time in philanthropy and with his family. So you can get an idea of the sort of background of this individual. He started sharing ideas when he had a series of visions. One was a vision of the perfection of humanity. The human being evolved to a perfect state of humanity, of being a human nonetheless, but with divine qualities. Another vision was of the divine being, the supreme, as a being of light, which wasn't part of his original traditional Hindu beliefs. It was a bit different, but he wanted to explore that. And the third vision was of transformation of the world, the modern world as we see it, as it was at that time, going through much upheaval, natural disasters, civil wars, a lot of conflict. But beyond that, he saw a world that had gone through all that and come out the other side, a world that had been renewed, a world that had been cleansed and purified. Think about how nature works, and Today our wildfires are not healthy. They are being created by us through various conditions. But in the natural times, when there was a bushfire in Australia, what would happen was that periodically there'd be a fire, and yes, a lot would be burnt, and the fire would be restricted to the bush. It wouldn't come into urban areas. The urban areas were quite distinct and different, so there was no damage to human life or anything. But the heat of the fire ensured that the seeds that were there could open up. Without the intensity of the fire and the heat, those seeds couldn't open and germinate. And so the fire served a purpose of destroying what was not necessary, but also generating something for the future. And so it was a generative thing that happened. It wasn't a destructive thing. But all this made him think very deeply about what the future held. And he gradually came to understand, after a period of isolation in the mountains and the Himalayas, he understood that there had to be a transformation of human consciousness. And the way this could work would be through spiritual education. And so he came back home, and home at that time was Hyderabad in the province of Sindh, which is still around today, but it was a united India rather than a divided India at that point. And he understood that if you wanted to have a world in which things could flourish and there was a better world, a world of harmony, there needed to be equality. I've been to Karachi a dozen times in the last 10-12 years, maybe more. We had a small centre operating there, and at the present time it's going through another upheaval and transformation. But I wouldn't walk in the streets of Karachi alone today, never mind in 1936. And so he understood that that part of society that had been relegated into second-class citizenship had to be given an opportunity, affirmative action, to be able to move forward. He also recognized that that equality would bring about equality in many other directions also. And so a very conscious choice was made in which he thought that the training to be teachers and leaders of the Brahma Kumaris would be the young women, the older women also, but the teachings that attracted a lot of young people at that time. And imagine the situation today where if you had considerable assets, and as I say, he was a jeweler, a self-made man, but reaching the heights of his work, he decided that he would hand over leadership to women at that moment. And he set up a foundation in which 8 young women were asked to be the trustees, and he made fluid all his assets, and they were handed over to young women aged between 14 and 19, none of whom had ever had a bank account, because it wasn't considered necessary at that time for women to do that. Can you imagine the foresight of this individual? Young women was good because it meant that they had their whole lifespan in front of them. And women, it was an extraordinary decision, a matter of great faith, a revolution in fact. And the community did not like it one little bit. They did not want their women to be leaders and teachers. And so there was quite a reaction. But the test of time was fine, and they stood their ground, and they in fact continued to live together as a community in Pakistan after the partition for several years. Then they moved to Mount Abu in India in 1950. And another year, that time in Karachi was spent in intense meditation, a journey in the exploration of what's going on in the laboratory of the mind. And of course the teachings and guidance from Brahma Baba. And then from coming to India, another year in intense meditation, and then sharing these ideas across India because their families had come to India by then and were inviting them to come and share. Until the time that he passed away in 1969, and I had the great fortune of meeting him through my childhood and then through my teenage years. And so the memory of that is still a very powerful guiding light for me. After that, there was an intense growth and expansion that happened under the leadership of two women. And one of them was young, the other one was elder. And the young woman, Dadi Prakash Mani, she was at that time 49. And she continued as the head of the organization even after the senior one passed away until 2007. And by then we had expanded into 120 countries, 110 registered centers and 10 other countries where activities happened. And thousands of people understanding these ideas. I share with you this story to say that spiritual leadership that was demonstrated by Brahma Baba and the Dadis has created a network that now serves the entire globe. All religions, all traditions, all colors, all creeds, everyone coming together at the spiritual university in Abu. When Robert Muller, who was at that time the Assistant Secretary General of the UN, came to India at our invitation in 1983, at that time he said, the UN is thinking about a world university, but you already have a world university here in Mount Abu. And I know that some of you will be coming to India this year in October. I was meeting a couple of people here who said they were coming. That's exactly what you will see. You will see a representation of the world going to study the same teachings together. And so leadership in today's world, how did Brahma Baba achieve all of this? And the Dadis continue to carry on that legacy and expand it further. Definitely humility and so many other things. I'd like to share a few of the things that I saw from them. To be able to carry everyone with you. A leader, no matter how powerful they are, how much can be achieved by one individual on their own. But when powerful ideas are shared with others, and others are given an opportunity to move forward in their own journey, then yes, there's a huge support team and a network that's created that's going to allow each one to develop, but also to carry the work further and further. Humility, cooperation, putting others first, that respect for others, valuing every human being, and being able to appreciate what each one brings to the gathering. Brahma Baba knew the name of every single one of the staff that was working in Mount Abu at that time. He knew personally, individually, the names of each one within the community. And it was just simply the gesture of love and respect, the recognition of the value of every human being. He had foresight, not just in terms of setting up the organization in the way that he did, but also on a personal level. When I was 16, he told me that I would be a spiritual teacher. I was an abu in my short skirts and blouses and short hair. That was my life, that's who I was. So I didn't need to change anything to be able to go to the ashram in Abu, so I came in that way. But he wasn't looking at anything external. He was able to see something within the soul. And at that time, I had no intention of being a spiritual teacher.
Oh yeah?
He was speaking in Hindi and I didn't know what the word spiritual meant. Ruhani, it was not a part of the common grassroots Hindi that I knew from movies. That was my only exposure to Hindi in London. So that he was able to understand the soul and know what the qualities of the soul were and the future. Absolute trust. When you trust others, they respond to your trust. And if you don't trust others, then the converse happens also. Neither do they trust you, nor is there likely to be any synergy. And the trust that he had came about through the trust that he had in himself, the faith that he had in himself. How does that come about? Faith in the self comes about when your inner core values and your conscience is aligned together. If there's a discrepancy between what your core values are and what your lifestyle is, then there's going to be lack of self-esteem, lack of respect for the self, and lack of trust in the self. And this is then what leads to breakdown in relationships with others also. Of course, they're also seeing your lack of continuity and sincerity in what you say and in what you do, or what your stated beliefs are and what you're actually doing in your life. And so combining these two factors together, synchronizing that energy and harmonizing your own energies allows you to function as a leader. And so that state of self-respect and awareness of the spiritual identity of the self is absolutely vital in this whole journey. And the more I know myself and understand how to iron out all the kinks that are surely there in every human being, but the more you're working on that and doing that with integrity, the more you're able to guide others in the right way also. And so the concern with every human being and giving them that respect. These are some of the qualities of leadership that I observed and attempt to follow. But also absolute faith, not just in the self but in the divine. Knowing that there are spiritual laws that the divine has given us. And when I talk about spiritual laws, I'm talking about things like the path of non-violence. It is a spiritual law that if I'm a being of peace and I see all forms of life as sacred, human life of course, but all forms of life is sacred, the path that I follow will be of non-violence. Another mantra, which is actually a golden rule that comes in all traditions: do unto others what you would have done to yourself. And so these are just two of the spiritual laws that I mentioned, but also another very important one: whatever are the seeds that I sow, such will be the fruits that I receive. I mentioned these three laws. Think about what's happening in the world at large today. Uncertainty, yes, of course, but what is the seed behind all of that? The upheaval that one sees, whether it's in the state of the economy, the state of the climate, the state of religion, the state of politics, the state of human affairs, relationships, the family unit. We see the pillars of society, of civilization actually, not just one society, but human civilization. We see all of these crumbling. And this isn't a pessimistic view. I think if you were to look at all the facts and statistics, you can see for yourself. But when you see this in a state of chaos and disintegration, the question comes, well, what's going on? And it's a very simple answer. We've moved very far away from human spiritual values. We might talk about them. We didn't even talk about them 20 years ago. At least today we're talking about them. But to actually cultivate those, nurture those within the self, and demonstrate those and live by those in our lives seems to be a far cry from the state of the world at the moment. Just to give you one example, I mentioned the fact of non-violence, not giving sorrow, do unto others, etc. If I look at climate change, huge topic, maybe the most extreme crisis that humanity is facing in terms of thousands of years. I don't think we've ever come to a situation like this. And having spoken to people who are truly experts in their field, I first heard this word, risk factors, and also tipping points some years ago by two leading scientists, one from Sweden, Johan Rockström, and another one in Potsdam in Germany, both of them leading lights in the subject. And they said many of the tipping points that we had predicted would happen in 50 years, we see are already happening now. What can we do about it? Governments are not listening. Are people going to listen? We hope they will. And we hope they'll take steps to be able to put pressure on governments. When people say they want something, they can make governments listen if there's enough energy and force directed to that. And so yes, the next COP is coming up in Azerbaijan, and in Glasgow the governments didn't listen. In Egypt they didn't listen. In Dubai they didn't. Now again, one can almost predict what's going to happen. But why we continue to be there is because we know that human consciousness can bring about change in any situation if we so desire. And if today we come back to our basic values of respect for all forms of life, biodiversity, and the age of extinction, this period, apart from being called the Anthropocene age, where human intervention has created a challenge, but also it's the age of extinction. So many species have been put into extinction by the human race just within the last 50 years or so. So all of these things are happening because there's no value for any form of life, neither for human life nor for other forms of life or nature itself. And given those conditions, the question why? We lost touch with ourselves. We lost touch with valuing our own lives, and lack of self-respect and value for the self, and you see it extending outwards and reaching this particular point. And so yes, the possibility of change is always present. If I had a message of only doom, I wouldn't be here today. But it's a message of hope. Yes, the tipping points have been crossed. Many out of the 16 tipping points in terms of climate change, I reckon about half of them have been crossed already. So it's not a story for the future, at some time maybe. And it's not in the far distant future either. It's very close. But human consciousness deciding that We want to change ourselves, our lifestyles. We want to come back to a state of harmony within, so that there can be harmony with others and harmony with all forms of life. And I believe that the next step of human evolution is truly that. I believe that after the dark night, the day has to come, and I think that that's not so far off. As human consciousness awakens, and I see more and more leaders thinking about values, practicing values, understanding that there's a need for silence, for introspection, for meditation, incorporating meditation into their work schedules, in their businesses. All these changes have happened in the last 10 years in a very visible way. It's beautiful to watch. And so I know that as the minority continues to grow more and more powerful, reach critical mass, and there'll be a transformation. And many, and become the majority. Yes, that's the way we're heading. I see the world of truth, of love, of justice happening in the future. From the dark age, the iron age, the movement is towards the golden age, the day. When we're in the darkest hour, we know that beyond that, it isn't the end, but there is something beyond, and beyond that is the day. And so I think this particular group of individuals who've chosen to be here tonight are part of that movement to bring about that change and to make that happen. And so thank you for being here, and I look forward to our conversation, but I also know that I hope you'll take it away as a guarantee that we are moving towards the day, and the day of love and light will be with us. Thank you.